players are shuffling up. We have Victor on Grixis Hollow One and Kieran on Dimir Mill.
Yeah, Kieran played at the most recent Pro Tour. Went 8-8, I believe. A very respectable performance against the best players in the world. We see there they are consulting each other's deck list. This is an open deck list tournament here at the Regional Championships in Australia. Have you played in an RC level event before?
I have. I think back before, when there was just the PTQs and whatnot. But yeah, definitely a very high level. I think they weren't open deck lists before, so it is good to see what your opponents are working with and sort of know what kind of opening hand you want to keep against these matchups. This one should be quite interesting. We've got Mill, which will try and mill out Victor's deck and try and empty that as quickly as possible. But Victor's deck will actually utilize the graveyard quite quickly, so it could be quite an explosive match we're about to see.
Yeah, it's very interesting. The Mill deck sort of foregoes the ability to win through life total damage and changes their win condition to their opponent's library hitting 0 cards. Of course, if you draw from an empty library, then that's it, lights out for you. So the players handing back each other's deck list, they get a couple of minutes to check that out, and then they've got to get the show on the road.
Yep. Presenting now, and I think they'll go to mulligans fairly shortly.
So what sort of cards can we expect to see in this Grixis Hollow One deck?
Yeah, so there's definitely a few. I think this is a bit of a variation from the black-red version of the deck. Victor here is splashing blue for Psychic Frog, which has seen quite a lot of play in Modern recently. And I think he's going to utilize a new card from Ether Drift, Marauding Mako. So that's whenever you discard one or more cards, you put that many counters on it. And with cards like Burning Inquiry, which discard a lot of cards, and Faithless Looting, you're bound to get a pretty big Shark Pirate.
Yeah, you're just going to have the whole graveyard filled, especially with Kieran helping out with it as well.
Yeah, so I'm looking forward. I think it should be quite explosive. As for Kieran, he will be milling out the decks quite quickly, but in order to sort of negate Victor's strategy, he'll be looking for cards like Surgical Extraction to get rid of those problematic cards.
All right, looks like we're off already. We have a turn 1, a land, and a Ruin Crab here from Kieran. These crabs are sort of the backbone of this deck, right? There's now 8 copies between the 2 cards?
Yeah, essentially. And, they mill 3 cards per land you play, so combined with a lot of fetch lands, that's 6 cards. So, yeah, it's quite a fast milling strategy. It's very consistent, so it's a way that you don't need to always cast spells, just play lands and get cards out of the library.
And we see Victor here with a turn 1, cracking a fetch land, grabbing a Blood Crypt here, shocking that one in, going to 17.
Yeah, so... and I think the land here, so this might come up a bit later, the land here for Kieran looks like it's Oboro. I think it's the Lord of the Rings version. So that one can bounce to your hand and then later play that with a few crabs and mill a few additional cards if you need those final cards to exile.
Right, and we see a Street Wraith being cycled here for Victor as well. Going down to 15, so already really sort of using this resource that we're not expecting Kieran to be putting any pressure on and being the life total here. We see... Is that a Vengevine in the graveyard there that I can see as well?
Yeah, it is. So yeah, that one, if he casts 2 creature spells, that will come back and start attacking very quickly. So that could be a quick clock. He's already got 1 creature cast off Madness with the Blazing Root Waller. So we'll see if he's got something else to get that active. Otherwise, he'll wait and see.
And here it is again, the Hollow One, the second creature being cast for the turn.
Yeah.
On turn 1, just from 1 mana. And here we see the response from Kieran in a Surgical Extraction. You mentioned this card.
Yeah, very timely from Kieran, and would have saved him quite a bit of damage. He's going to pay 2 life to pay the Phyrexian mana, but he will get rid of that Vengevine, which would have been attacking him for 4. It's a very fast start for Victor, but definitely a bit less now that the Surgical has hit the Vengevine. I think the added benefit here is, he can see what is in Victor's hand. He's working with 2 Burning Inquiries and a Orcish Bowmasters, which synergize quite well there as well.
Yeah, that's interesting because you want to get the Bowmasters down first, right, before you play the Burning Inquiry.
Definitely. And Burning Inquiry is a card that can be used also a bit offensively as well because, you have a strategy with what you've got in your hand. Burning Inquiry randomly discards those cards. So it could be, sometimes I've been unfortunate end of that where I've discarded some lands, haven't had the cards that I've sort of wanted for that synergy.
Yeah, Burning Inquiry sort of giving you the ability to force your opponent to mulligan halfway through the game.
Yes.
And of course, it does have the same effect for both players. Both players drawing 3 and discarding 3 at random. But if you're making use of these discarded cards through Vengevine, through Basking Rootwaller, through Hollow One, and through the Detective's Phoenix that we may see come out of this Grixis deck, fresh out of Ether Drift, then these symmetric effects, they're only symmetrical in theory. In practice, they can be very different.
Yeah, definitely. A bit of RNG with the card, but I suppose when your deck utilizes all the cards, it's a lot more advantageous for yourself.
That's right. So Victor down to 13 already. Do you think that Kieran is ever going to attack with any creature ever this game?
Unfortunately not. I think it would have to be a very interesting situation for us to see that. But yeah, we'll see what Kieran has here, because yeah, he's facing quite a lot of pressure, given that it is just turn 1.
Yeah, turn 1. Here's my 4/4. Here's my 1/1 that can grow. Here's an attempt at a 4/3 haste.
Yep.
The good news for Kieran, at least, is that Kieran was able to put the brakes onto that. And Surgical Extraction, not just removing the 1 from the graveyard, but removing all of them from the deck.
Yeah, he'll be glad to not have to see any from these milled cards coming out as well.
So a land for turn there looks like a Misty Rainforest, and that milled over 2 lands and a Street Wraith for Victor.
Yeah, the Street Wraiths will be interesting because they do help with that, I guess, bestow effect from Detective's Phoenix. So they do help provide some of that 6 mana that they require. So if Victor has some of those in his hand, that could be also another explosive way of utilizing these creatures.
So Victor untapping, playing a land for turn here, and just straight into the red zone with both creatures. The good news is the Rootwaller is pretty small and could be blocked by the Ruin Crab. The bad news is the Rootwaller, I think, is exactly big enough to attack through the Crab if Victor was to spend the mana on it.
Yeah, certainly not worth the block here. I think the Crab is more valuable to Kieran than the life currently. I think he's still on a decent amount of life. So yeah, I think he'll still try and commit to this mill plan, and hopefully these Burning Increase will help slightly. Those 3 cards at least removed from the deck.
It's very cool to see, and you see it a lot at this this high level of competitive play here. Victor choosing not to do anything in the first main phase there, to hold up the mana to activate that Rootwaller in the middle of combat. And even though that was never going to happen, Kieran wasn't going to block that Rootwaller. If Victor had cast a card in the first main phase, there would have been the perfect ability there for Kieran to block once the shields were down, or the swords were down, as it may be.
Yeah. Interesting. I think Victor's responding to a trigger from the Hedron Crab, it looks like. Oh, yeah, so it looks like he fetched, and he responded by fetching as well.
So Victor fetched a Steam Vents there, and is that
I think that's an
Undercity Sewers?
Yeah, I think that's a Surveil land. They've been quite popular in Modern. I think each deck has found their way to a few copies of that. Yeah, definitely gives, gives Kieran a peek into what's coming up, and hopefully a mill card that can, do some damage.
It's very cool to be able to use your land drop to improve the quality of your future draws, right?
Yeah, very, very solid card. Kieran's having a look, consulting his hand, it looks like.
Yeah, I didn't manage to see what that card was. Maybe we'll get another glimpse as he either straightens it up or ships it to the bottom here. But we did mill over another 3 cards. It looked like a Burning Inquiry, a Hollow One, and I think there was a land as the 3rd one there. Field of Ruin was the card surveilled for Kieran.
Definitely a good card for mill, but perhaps not in this matchup. Generally quite good against those Eldrazi decks, anything using those multiple lands. But yeah, this, I guess for Victor's deck, it's more just a Grixis deck, so it doesn't really need that mana as much. Although, speaking of which, there's some Psychic Frogs milled, which looks like it's Victor's Splash for blue.
And Kieran's got to be happy with that, right? This Psychic Frog has the ability to end a game so fast.
Yeah, definitely. And with with Kieran helping him with those meals from the crab, frog should always have flying as well.
So you could sort of reword Burning Inquiry in this matchup, right? And say that it's just both players mill 3 cards?
Essentially.
We see an Orcish Bowmasters come down here. We are working on getting those life totals back, but we see the players are both on 11 right now, I believe, perhaps 10 for Victor. They're just making sure that they understand what their life totals are. And we see the Orc army coming in hot.
Yeah, I think that's a response to the Field of Ruin. Yep.
Is there any advantage to timing this here rather than just doing it in the end step? I suppose the mana?
Yeah, so I guess he'll kind of refund a mana, so he'll activate the 2 and the Field of Ruin, and then both players will find a land as well. So Kieran will have now this Swamp in play now and have another trigger of the Crab. He might have a follow-up play. That might be where we're at with this. I think I saw a Surgical in hand, so he could potentially cast that for mana. Alternatively, if he has a Fatal Push in hand, he could activate that to trigger the Revolt. But yeah, I'm curious to see what Kieran does here.
You know, I've never considered Field of Ruin to be a landfall synergy card here. It is a sort of fetch land in a way, in that it does find a basic from your own deck and get you a second landfall trigger.
Yeah, certainly. Although,
was that no basic found there for Victor?
I think so. So he's, oh no, so yeah, so he has a mountain in his deck list. So it might have already been milled or it's in his hand.
Wow, and that's something that Kieran may have known from the fact that this is an open deck list tournament, right?
Yeah, very beneficial to have that. So it's essentially just a land destruction there. So quite good value, and he got to mill a few cards as well.
This is seeming like a really close race, honestly, between, the turn 1 that Victor had with the Faithless looting and the Burning Inquiries in hand, and just this one single crab powered by fetch lands. This is honestly looking like a close race. I think the Hollow one's going to put on a lot of pressure, but... And Kieran using the known information of those 2 Burning Inquiries in hand?
Yeah, very sneaky and very good now that he's sort of taken away... and now that he knows the Bowmaster's in play, that'll save him 3 damage from those triggers, and also it will stop the Orc army from growing. So that's a very nice surgical, and it should save him quite a bit of life. I think I saw earlier Kieran was counting the cards in Victor's deck, so potentially an ominous sign, or...
You've got to be worried. It's like when you see, a complex board state and your opponent just starts counting on their fingers and tapping the table.
Something spicy should be coming.
Yeah. The good news is Victor doesn't have to think about this attack. It's very obvious. You just turn the ball sideways.
Yep, pretty much.
You never have to worry about, is my opponent going to attack me back or anything like that.
Definitely. Kieran's considering a block here.
Surely it's free to just block one of the 1-power creatures, right?
Potentially. I think the only possibility is if Victor has another land, and then he plays another Bowmaster, potentially he could do some damage there, but I think he'll just block the Orc army here, try and minimize some damage, and hopefully go for the rest of Victor's deck.
So it looks like Kieran down to 3 life here. Gonna have to pull out something big on the... There's the mountain.
Yep, unfortunately it was in his hand.
Maybe we knew that from the previous surgical extraction.
Yeah, that's very likely. So yeah, he used that offensively, and he's taken away Victor's black mana. So that's potentially another Bowmaster's taken away. So yeah, he's only got sort of EZ colors at the moment, so he's a bit out of mana. But unfortunately, it doesn't look like he's got anything here.
Yep, looks like they'll be packing up and going to game 2. So let's talk about sideboarding.
Yeah, definitely. In terms of the Grixis deck, I am curious to see, because I presume they don't have too much for mill. That's not a deck that I think a lot of people maybe expected here, although it is quite good against some of those top decks. We've seen some people in the metagame bring in those Eldrazi Titans, but it doesn't seem like Hollow one's too worried about it. In terms of strategy, I think... his deck's already quite solid against it, and we saw that with that very explosive opening hand as well. That's a good way to sort of beat these mill strategies, is just utilizing that graveyard and having those very fast starts that can sort of overpower the effects of those crabs.
We see the players here in person consulting each other's deck list again for sideboarding, making sure that they have all of the information. They're not going to get surprised by something coming in out of the sideboard. The one card I noticed in the Grixis deck sideboard, there's one island. And we saw right there, on our game, we saw a Field of Ruin that couldn't find a basic land. Do you board in the second island?
It's potentially. I don't think so in this matchup. I feel like it's more for those Taxes decks where, like, they're repeating that White Orchid Phantom and they're trying to target your lands. In this one, if they're targeting your lands on turn 3 and you've already got some pressure, it's okay. And generally, that fetch land will find you that black mana. I think in that case, it was a rare case where he didn't have it.
Sure.
So maybe not in this matchup. Potential, I think, for the Engineered Explosives, it is a funny one where it will take care of those crabs, but it could also, hit one of his own early Root Wallers or that Maker as well. So it's a bit of a double-edged sword. Potentially that Dismember just to get rid of the crabs so there's no active pressure. But it is a funny one where obviously that crab is helping you in a way, but it will hinder you in the long run.
Yeah, that's right. Now, looking over at the mill sideboard here, we've got an Ensnaring Bridge, a Set Adrift, 3 Extirpate, 3 Nihil Spellbomb, 3 Toxic Deluge, and 4 Consign to Memory.
Yeah, I think those Nihil Spellbombs will come in, especially to sort of detract from Vengevines and then those Phoenixes as well, which give you those really explosive hands. And it will, I believe, so it will. I don't think it actually affects the Madness. I think Madness actually exiles it. So, but it does affect a lot of the deck. So that might come in, and I think the Bridge might come in as well, just because you saw that Hollow one come in for 4 on turn 2. So he'll try and empty out his hand a bit, and then try and get that Bridge to sort of protect him. I don't know if a Bridge in play can be answered. It technically can by the Engineered Explosives, but that's not something I expect to see. Victor bring in here.
How cool is that as sort of a metagame shift where, you could get surprised by this Ensnaring Bridge, be not prepared for it, not poured anything in because you didn't know it was there.
Yeah.
But at this open deck list event, you do know it's there. You know every card that's in your opponent's sideboard, and you can be proactive in your sideboarding decisions.
Yeah, definitely. It's kind of like that extra Jedi mind trick essentially. You have it there, and they sort of have to respect it as well. But you might play that game that game of chicken where you might not bring it in necessarily, but they will definitely have to respect it as well. So yeah, it might force the Grixis player to bring in something for it, but we shall see.
I suppose the good news there is that it's Engineered Explosives. It does have other applications if you were to board it in.
Yeah.
If you were to board in Shatter, just destroy target artifact, no other words on it, and your opponent didn't have the Ensnaring Bridge, you'd feel a bit silly. But I guess these Engineered Explosives can clean up crabs, as you mentioned before. Yeah,
so a potential card to bring in, but I think generally Victor will be quite happy with his main deck. It will be very explosive, he was hoping for. Whereas Kieran will be hoping for some more exile abilities to sort of get rid of those problematic cards.
Do you think Kieran would consider the Toxic Deluge in the sideboard as an answer for Hollow One, or maybe a Mako that gets out of control?
Yeah, potentially. I think having that on turn 3 and getting rid of the Hollow One, pay the 4 life to get rid of the problematic cards to prevent, future damage. There's definitely something that could come in as well.
All right, well, looks like they've made all of their decisions. They're shuffling, presenting here, and we'll be looking at some hands for game 2.
Yep.
Okay, I can see a hand here for Kieran. I see a Jace, the Perfected Mind. I see a Fatal Push. I see 2 Fatal Pushes and some lands.
Yeah, definitely an ideal start for Kieran. Some removal for those early threats.
Both players keeping their 7. And a turn 1 under City Sewers and a consideration here. Not a consider.
Yeah, the Jace here could be quite interesting. It does have that sort of nullifying effect on attacking, or on to one creature at least, to sort of at least reduce some of the damage, potentially from a Hollow One. And then with that ability to sort of do some big time milling later on as well. So a kind of more control-y hand from Kieran, not as explosive, and potentially to his benefit with Victor's deck.
2 Fatal Pushes as well. That has the ability to answer anything in Victor's deck except for exactly Hollow One or Street Wraith, if we somehow end up in a world with a Street Wraith on the battlefield.
Yeah.
Good insurance against any Makos or anything like that might come down.
Most certainly, yeah. He's sort of playing, definitely that control strategy, a few removable spells, and then hopefully landing a Planeswalker or two. I think he had a Tameo in his hand as well, so that might be able to generate some card advantage there.
So Victor's turn 1, we've got a fetch land into a Blood Crypt and a Burning Inquiry. So all of this talk we've got about Kieran's opening hand and the decisions he's made to keep this hand, that may all get undone here. Burning Inquiry going to sort of randomize both players' hands a little here.
Yeah, definitely. I think we'll have to see what comes of it. Generally, the players will put the cards in the middle, roll some dice to see which randomized cards will get taken out.
We'll see if we can catch what they're discarding here. That looks like 2 lands and a lightning bolt, or maybe a land and 2 lightning bolts discarded there. And then for Kieran, 2 lands and a Glimpse the Unthinkable. So it looks like it actually didn't touch any of the cards that Kieran already had in hand.
Yeah, I think Kieran will be quite happy with that. So I think Victor's now cycling a Street Wraith, so we'll see what else he could have. And he's got his deck's namesake. Oh, he's got
2 of them. That's brutal. You know how that part where I said that Fatal Push doesn't touch this card?
Yes, very unfortunate. Yeah, so that hand has now looked a bit worse than we initially had hoped for. But yeah, definitely a very explosive. And what Victor wants from his deck as well, those Burning Inquiry into Hollow One is the ideal start. And to have multiple should put a very fast clock on Kieran.
Now, you mentioned before that Street Wraith can power out a Detective's Phoenix from the graveyard. We did see one milled there to this Ruin Crab.
Yeah, that's right. So that should help pay for that Collect Evidence 6. We'll see if he does that here. He definitely has a lot of damage, but that will definitely avoid any potential blocks. I don't think Kieran will block, but if he had to, he wouldn't be able to because it will give it Flying and Haste.
This card is a mess of words, I tell you what.
They definitely had a lot of fun with the different ability keywords they could put on some cards.
Yeah, it was very cool to see in Modern Horizons, not being tied to one plane or one set of keywords. You really get these sort of mixed bags with Bestow and Collect Evidence, which are from 2 entirely different sets of Magic so far.
Yeah, the creators definitely got to flex their design muscles there.
And we do see that that Detective's Phoenix, and if I'm not mistaken, outside of that, the entire converted mana cost of the graveyard was about 2 there.
Yes, pretty much. So, that Burning Inquiry was very beneficial, although he did cycle the Street Wraith. So that is, it's just the deck coming very synergistically.
Is that an attack for 10 then? 2 hollow ones with a Phoenix attached?
Yeah, that's a very quick clock. We'll see what Kieran does here.
So cracking a fetch land here, getting to mill another 3 cards.
This is a side's announcement. This is a side's announcement.
What could Kieran have here?
I feel like he'll find a Surveil land. So that's that Undercity Sewers. See what he could potentially have. See if potentially he could see that Ensnaring Bridge. And that will be good because now he has milled that Engineered Explosive that could have potentially taken that out.
Yeah, the 3 cards there being a Psychic Frog, an Engineered Explosives, and an Island.
Yep.
You can't feel comfortable staring down 10 power. Granted, you've got 1 blocker, but this hollow one has wings now.
Yeah, it's definitely presenting a very fast clock. I think Kieran definitely wasn't hoping for that, although he did keep his top card, so hopefully that is an answer to some of these hollow ones.
A Field of Ruin, mill another 3. That is a Mako, a Burning Inquiry, and a land. And just a pass.
Yeah, we'll see what he has. He might have to block here if he doesn't have anything else for that, to anything to deal with these hollow ones. And I think he might just be hoping to, I guess, find a way to manipulate the deck to find that Ensnaring Bridge. That's the only real out he has here, I feel.
Well, even then, there's 5 cards in Kieran's hand this turn. We would have to see something like fatal push on your hollow one, because you can target the hollow one even if it doesn't do anything, right?
Yeah,
Just to sort of empty the hand a little.
yeah, definitely. It's not looking too good. We'll see what Victor follows up with here.
And Victor is absolutely loving the ability to just fetch, shock, pay life for this, pay life for this, pay life for this, without having to worry about what Kieran's doing on the other side. You see, in both of these games, Victor's down to 9 life now, and Kieran has not done any part of that.
Yeah, when you're facing some zero-powered crabs, you definitely don't have to worry as much.
Ooh, and we see a second engineered explosive. So one was milled over to the ruin crab, and another one here. And then an attack.
He's cast Drown in the Lock here.
Okay.
And that will be quite beneficial because, as you can probably see, Victor's graveyard is quite filled up. So it will destroy that attacker. So that will prevent, I guess, potential lethal damage. Although that second hollow one looks like it should be hitting, although we'll see what Kieran decides here. So yeah, that's connected. I think Kieran's down to 5, is it?
Yeah, that sounds correct.
Mulling over his potential options.
So why did Victor play the explosives and not crack it straight away?
That was curious. He might hold it out as a potential threat in case he plays another blocker for this turn and then he can clear everything else out in one turn. Or potentially he has something in his hand, potentially like an Orcish Bowmaster. So if he draws any cards, he's able to put in an extra damage and an extra threat. Doesn't look like that was the case, but maybe he wanted to have that option open.
Was it perhaps stopping another crab from coming down on Kieran's turn?
Yeah, potentially, just to have that second blocker. But he's definitely in a comfortable position to have that option available to him.
Yeah, and if we're not mistaken, if Kieran did take 4, and go down to 5, you've got to be worried about lightning bolts as well.
Most definitely, and that Surveil land has hit another Detector's Phoenix, and because that hollow one went to the graveyard, it's able to collect evidence, and he's able to give that other hollow one flying.
Yeah, wow. Okay, so we're seeing...
Oh, very interesting here. So he's using this collect evidence very strategically. So he's removing, I guess, some 6 cards, or 6 different cards, which total up to that 6 mana. So they can avoid surgical extraction here.
And that included exiling the engineered explosives, which actually has a mana cost of 0 and doesn't contribute to this collect evidence. But
yeah, he just wanted it out of his graveyard, and importantly, that lightning bolt too. So if that does get surgical, or he can't get surgical, so he can potentially point that at the face of Kieran.
Well, the gloves are off, the chips are down.
Yep.
What have we got?
Is that another drown?
Another drown in the log. Wow.
Yeah. That's very timely, and something definitely Kieran wanted to see, something to at least deal with the problematic hollow ones.
I wonder how many cards there actually was in Victor's graveyard there, whether there was perhaps the ability to collect even more evidence, exiling land. Can you exile lands to collect evidence? Is that something you can do?
I'm not 100% sure. We'll see. Although, see, the good thing with this Detector's Phoenix, and I think maybe one reason why Kieran left that Fear of the Dead is they're 3 mana, so if he potentially uses that now, he can trigger Revolt and then use those Fatal Pushes to get rid of the Phoenixes.
Yep.
He doesn't want to do that too quickly because then he can, potentially bestow that onto something that's in play, but that option is available.
Yeah, I guess you want to do that in combat as the last opportunity.
He is using it now potentially as he has a play for his turn. He's down to 3 life, unfortunately, so life is a very scarce resource for him.
Yeah, fetching out the swamp, so surely we'll see a Fatal Push here, and then perhaps, do we see maybe the Jace come down?
Yeah, possibly.
Saw that in hand very early, but we haven't had the... Honestly, Kieran just hasn't had the opportunity, hasn't had the time.
Yeah, it's been pedal to the metal from turn 1 with that very explosive start, so I think he's still trying to recover. Unfortunately, he's at a very low life total, so he is potentially dead to any lightning bolts coming up. It is also awkward that both Phoenixes are in play. So, he has Surgical in his hand. So if he gets rid of one, he still needs to get rid of the other and he can't just Surgical it away.
That was a Watery Grave shocking in here.
Yeah.
And 2 Fatal Pushes.
Yep, he'll get rid of the Phoenixes for now. And I guess he has to hope Victor doesn't have a creature in play.
And that's it, right? Kieran can't Surgical this turn with only 1 life. Kieran just needs to fade 1 turn of Victor having no creature, no ability to bring these Phoenixes back, or bring a single Phoenix back. And this is it, if Kieran can survive this turn, right?
Yeah, he will be looking a lot better if he can, although that is a Root Waller, and that looks like it might be game. Yeah.
Yep, Kieran packing up the cards there. Perhaps not the matchup that Kieran was looking for in this room.
Definitely not. I think these, I guess, Hollow One decks definitely love the fact that their graveyard would get milled. So a bit of an unfortunate matchup for Kieran, but definitely one Victor would hope to see a lot more in this tournament.
Welcome back here to Regional Championship 8 here in Sydney, Australia. Jim Dowling, Kwang Wu. That was a cool round 1.
It was very exciting, very different cards, and we did get to see an Ether Drift card in that Mako.
It was cast in that game 1, but we didn't see it doing any extra work there. But it would have been cool to see it popping off a little bit.
Most certainly. It was definitely those Hollow Ones taking over. I think Mill is a deck that has risen to a bit of popularity. It's good against those top meta decks that we might see later in the day. A lot of these decks don't have an answer to your library. They're more focused on the board at hand. So I'm curious to see what else we see. These are decks, potentially that could attack those top decks in the meta as well.
Well, what are you expecting to see a lot of today?
I think Breach is definitely the deck to beat. I think it's done well in a lot of the other regional championships as well, and potentially on that potential ban hit list that's coming up as well. That's definitely the #1 deck. I think we've seen Black-White, the Blink deck, that's risen to popularity with the rise of Ketramos from Ether Drift. And then the other top deck I'd say would be Red-Green Eldrazi, definitely utilising those more powerful cards from Modern Horizons 3. Those Soul Lands getting into, powering up into those very fast Emeralds or just very big dudes. I think those will be the top 3 decks we see today, and with a bit of Boros energy and maybe some Dimir tempo decks as well to sort of complement them.
All right. Well, that's us for round 1 here at the Regional Championship. We'll be back shortly for round 2. Stay tuned.